Hey guys, welcome back to the Max Spence Business Podcast. Today I have a very special guest, but before I jump into this podcast, if you guys like the content that I'm putting out and the people I'm interviewing, please subscribe, leave a like, leave a review. If you can, go over to Apple Podcasts, leave a review. It helps out a lot with the podcast and also the people that are coming on the show and getting more awareness for what they do as well. So today on the podcast, I have Hayden Cashion. So Hayden Cashion is the CEO and founder of Cashion Marketing, a digital marketing agency. It's great having you on the show, Hayden.
And I'm super honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So I know we were speaking a little bit before the show just about personal backgrounds and stuff. But why don't we jump with a little bit of intro? So people that don't know, maybe don't know who you are. What do you do in a nutshell, and sort of how did you sort of get into digital marketing?
Yeah, so I'll try to give you like just a 2-minute story. Basically, the common theme throughout my life is I've always fallen deeply in love with things. And as soon as I fall out of them, I've been okay to take a step back and follow that new passion. So when I was younger, it started with highly competitive soccer. Then I kind of fell in love with skateboarding. Then I fell in love with music. And then I fell in love with business. Then I fell in love with marketing. And then I fell in love with digital marketing. And that's kind of how I got to here over the last, 15 years, let's say. I've been in the digital marketing world for the last 3 years. The first half of it was working in sports and working for an agency. And then I transitioned into my own company January 2019. And basically what I do is I use Facebook ads, Instagram ads, and Google ads to drive business results for my clients. My clients are in a multitude of industries, sports, restaurants, gyms, services like wedding services or cleaning services, e-commerce. So multitude of industries. And the reason I like to do that too is because I get insights from all these different places, and I can start to see like what the consistencies are across just marketing in general and human psychology in general, and then leverage those to make my company stronger.
Okay, awesome. So what do you think what do you think about, like, why do you think you like digital marketing over, maybe other avenues of marketing or other sorts of business? What do you like? What really gets you excited being like in the digital marketing space?
Yeah, it's funny. Studying my past has allowed me to really understand why I love it. And it's because of two things. In high school, my strongest subject was math. I've always been a numbers guy. I've always been a math guy and analytics guy, let's say. But I've always also had that creative side, right? Like I fell in love with skateboarding because it was just a creative expression. You and the board, you can do whatever you want. You can jump up ramps, you can go downstairs, you can grind the bench, you can just skate on flat ground. Like you can do so much, and nobody really judges each other because like what one person does isn't necessarily better than what another person does. It's art, right? And then that's also why I fell in love with music, because it's just a creative expression where it's like you have the beat, you write the lyrics, you record it, you interact with people, people give you feedback. But at the end of the day, who's to say this is better than that? It's just art. And I've always loved art. And I think digital marketing actually combines analytics, math, and art because you create content, right? Whether it's a picture, video, caption, headline, it's all artistic expression. But then you get the data on the back end to justify that artistic expression, get insights, and then get better with your artistic expression. So it kind of combines the two things that have always just been naturally I've drawn toward.
Okay, awesome. And you actually opened your own business pretty quickly. When you got into digital marketing, you spent some time. I think it was with it's like, was it the Ottawa Senators or the Red Blacks? You were doing their digital marketing for them, and then after I think like a year or something, you went off and started your own company and instantly just started having clients and started making it. So what was that sort of journey like? Because like what's sort of the background to that journey, and like was there struggles, and like how did you actually sort of become so good at it that you could start your business and just go off and keep start rolling?
Yeah, 100%. So kind of like what I said in the beginning about my intro is I've never been scared to pivot when something doesn't feel right. And I think that that's actually been my biggest strength. I think a lot of people, when they get good at something, they struggle to change and chase that next thing because they're kind of comfortable where they're at, right? And so for me, I was in marketing in university and I enjoyed it, but I didn't know like what I wanted to do within marketing. It's a massive discipline. And I got an email by accident to do this thing called a digital marketing certification. It was like an intensive program through the summer, optional. And I was like, you know what, let me try it. So I did it, and week in, week out, I loved everything that we were learning about. And this is where it starts to feel right. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is now like what I'm drawn towards, what I'm passionate about. Why am I going home and YouTubing more about it and Googling more about it and learning more about it? It's just like becomes natural that I'm just passionate about. And so I was like very excited. And through that course, they would help you get an internship. So they had about 8 different companies that you could say, okay, these are my top 3, and they would try to give you an interview. And then obviously with the interview, it's kind of up to you to sell it. So my number 1 was OSEG, which is the Red Blacks, the 67s, and former Fury. And so I did the interview there, and luckily got the internship. Was doing that for 9 months, and while I was doing that, a lot of things like happened by chance. It's funny, like I was golfing with my dad's friend, who is a personal development coach, and he had a couple clients that were looking for digital marketing services. And so I just happened to tell him what I was up to, and he was like, "Oh, I have some clients that actually might be able to use your service." And so I started consulting for these restaurants on the side while I was working at OSEG. And I started to realize that like at OSEG, I was a piece of a big puzzle, and my job started to become cyclical. It was the same day in, day out, because they just have so many events going on that essentially they were just like, put up another campaign, put up another campaign, and it was just the same campaign over and over again, just changing slight nuances, right? But when I was consulting for the restaurants, I really was looking at the whole scope of the restaurant and understanding like, okay, like strategically, what are our value propositions? Okay, what does that look like in content? What does that look like organically as the brand? What's the landing page experience? What do we want to run as ads? How do we want to measure it? Like I was looking at everything, and for me, I enjoyed that challenge, right? Whereas at OSEG, it's starting to feel less and less like a challenge. And for me, being 22 at the time, I just wanted challenge. I didn't care about money. I knew that getting as much experience as possible, learning, would open up any door that I wanted in the future. So I had a prof at the time who was a former digital marketing consultant. So I messaged him and I said, "Hey, can we go for a lunch? I just want to ask you about marketing consulting," right? So we had a great conversation. He gave me some great advice. But what ended up happening is 3 weeks later, he got reached out to by an agency in Montreal for him to be a consultant for them. And he's like, "Hey, I'm too busy right now. I'm a prof, but I know this guy who's looking for consulting work." So he connected me. That's where I got the opportunity to work in this agency. And this agency essentially let me lead a really big project for a television network. And it was a lot of responsibility at 22 years old, but it was really the challenge that I was looking for. It was like the restaurants, but on a national scale, right? And so I took the project from front to back, learned so much. And while I was doing this, ended up meeting Tony Greco. And when I met Tony Greco, he basically inspired me to start my own thing. He kind of assessed where I was at, gave me some opportunities as well to help me transition and make the leap make more sense. And through that, I mustered up the courage to do it. Even though I had like a really nice job, I was learning a lot. Like I loved working at the agency, but it was like what Tony was offering for me. It was just like, I won't have this forever. I know I'm eventually probably going to start something. So now is kind of the perfect time. I felt like the universe was telling me to do it. And so took the leap and never looked back.
Damn, that's a crazy story, and it's like
Yeah.
like it's just how life works in those weird ways. It's like I there's probably a word for it, but like you know when you like I sort of relate it to like when you buy a car or something, and then you notice those cars everywhere, right? It's like when you go down
Yeah.
the business and digital marketing route, or like the business route, and you open your brain to it, you start seeing more opportunities. You start seeing problems that you're like, hey, I can solve this. Or you start seeing things in different ways. Like you probably right now, you probably like everybody else looks at like, you know, a digital ad or something like that. And they're just probably, okay, cool. That's a digital ad. Or, oh, that was actually pretty interesting. And then you're saying like, oh, I could actually, this could have been done actually a lot better if they did this with it. Or, you know, if they did something, if they transitioned like this, or they laid it out like this. And it's just how your brain starts, like over time, your brain sort of starts working like that. And you start like building all these sort of like, I don't know, like receptors or something. And you just start understanding how it sort of flows. And, you know, you have that intuition to be like, okay, no, we should do this. So that's
100%.
absolutely incredible. So actually, let's jump to actually when you started your business. So, you know, Tony Greco, I don't know, did he sort of like, did you start doing digital consulting for his company or some of his, you know, friends' companies, or how did that sort of go down?
Yeah, exactly. I started doing some consulting for his friends' companies. So he kind of came to me with a good proposition, a structure that made sense for both of us. And he was like, if you want to start your company, like, I think that this would make a lot of sense. And I thought about it for probably 2 weeks, because like I said, like, and it was crazy at the time too, all this leading up, even while I was at the agency, I was a part-time student. So I wasn't even graduated university yet, but I really thought about it. I talked to my parents about it, and just, I couldn't find like the problem. I was like, it kept making sense to me, and obviously there's a risk, right? It could just not work. I also didn't know Tony at the time. Like, I'd only known him for a few weeks, but it just didn't make sense why he would want to screw me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's spending his time. He's a lot of things he could be doing. Why is he spending his time on me if he's not serious about it, right? And so for me, it was like, obviously I'm only getting older, and as you get older, you get more obligations, and making big leaps in your life become a lot more difficult because you have more things depending on you, right? Whether that's car and payments, house payments, a wife or kids, or a lot of things, right? So it only gets harder. So I was like, might as well do it right now, while I'm young and while I don't have anything else relying on me. If I go to zero, it doesn't really matter. I'll just find a job and start again, right? So.
Okay, awesome. And then, how many years are you into your company right now? Are you 2 years or a year and a half, or how long are you into your business?
Yeah, so it's January 2019. So at the end of the year, I'll be 2 years.
Okay, awesome. Congratulations, man.
Thank you.
That must be very exciting. So, with that, so what were actually the first couple months like after you sort of completed those? Like, were those contracts for a year, or were they for 6 months, or were they depending on like the ads, or how did the sort of contracts work out?
Yeah, it's funny. Like, in the beginning, you don't really know what you're doing, right? So I didn't even have clauses of timelines, and I didn't even want to have clauses of timelines, like psychoanalyzing myself and thinking back, because in the beginning, you just want to get off the ground. You want to get clients, and whatever it takes to get clients, you want to do. So for me, like, I didn't want to put anything in the contract that could potentially hinder it. So if I'm like 6-month commitment or a year commitment or whatever, to me, that's just like, if I'm doing good work and I'm confident that I can do good work, they don't need to be locked into a 6-month commitment. They'll want to do a six, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
for me, I was just like, I don't want to, risk losing a client because of something so small like that. I'd rather take more risk on my end, but increase the chance of me getting them.
Oh, okay, awesome. And then, so how did you sort of build that business at the beginning? Once you started, like, how did you sort of like, were you reaching out to people on LinkedIn? Like, what I'm sort of trying to figure out is like, how did you actually sort of start getting your clients at the beginning and started growing and started making like an income of that source?
Yeah.
Like, how were you sort of marketing yourself to the people?
So it's interesting. Like, the thing about me is, before I started my own business, I'd been documenting everything already on my story. So when I started at OSEG, my mind was like, like, I'm 22 years old. I'm a guy working in sports marketing. Like, I think a lot of people would think this is cool and interesting, right? So I was like, why don't I just document my days on my story and just start talking about it? So when I decided to start my own company, I had already been about a year and a half into daily documenting that I'm a digital marketing expert, let's say, right? And so I had a lot of awareness around it. So when I started my own company, there was a lot of people following me for just, following me to learn about digital marketing, things of that nature. But then when I became a company that offered services, I had, people that had reached out. And another thing is, like, while I was working at the agency, I did have some people that were like, hey, I'm interested. And so for me, like, I never felt like I took a crazy leap. Like, it just made sense to me. Like, there was obviously some level of risk, but I've always just bet on personal brand and built personal brand, and the business, not the business has come to me, but the opportunities have come to me. I've never, ever, ever in my life reached out to somebody and asked them if I can do their marketing, ever. And I think 99.9% of businesses, that's all they do, right? Or they run some sort of like advertising to bring the marketing. For me, I just build the top of funnel brand, just make everybody aware, like, this is what I do. These are services I offer. These are the results I typically get. By virtue of that, over time, business comes to me. And then the one thing was with Tony, he was going to connect me with a bunch of people in his network and just get me meetings, right? And so that was really the icing on the cake of, like, I felt like I was good enough that if I had some meetings through Tony, I could really get this off the ground. And I still had the restaurants. I was still consulting for the restaurants. So I had a bit of income coming in there, but I also, like, was living at home at the time and didn't have a car at the time. I guess I bought a car right when I started the business, but I don't know. Like, I just made everything make sense. Right.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, no, that's incredible. And actually that was like a really, really good piece, like sort of nugget and advice is actually you like, did you naturally start doing that, or was that from like, you know, because I know previously we were talking like I'm a big fan of Gary Vee and you're a big fan of Gary Vee. Was it sort of something that he was saying, like, you know, in his stuff he talks about, you know, personal branding, you know, document your story. Was it something like that that sort of clicked for you at the time, and you were just like, you know what, let's start documenting, just start creating? And that's a huge thing for, like, let's say anybody who's in a position now of like, you know, they're 18 or 19 years old, they're at university, and they can document, you know, their daily life as a student at Queen's University, or, you know, let's say Trent or some, you know, Santa Fe University or something, and their journey of,
Yeah.
you know, going into their own business or something. So
Yeah.
what sort of actually made you start that, and sort of like because my sort of thinking with this is that a lot of people won't do it because they don't want to put themselves out there, or they think like, you know, they put their first post out, because a lot of people will, like, I mean, people will do it, but they won't do it, and they won't become consistent with it, right? They might put out, you know, 1 or 2 posts and nothing really happens, and they're just like, oh, okay, like nobody really cares about this, nobody's really interested. And it's not like, you know, the first post they put out,
it's
somebody's
like it's just like doing like 1 or 2 push-ups and expecting to be jacked.
yeah,
It's all reps, it's volume, right? Like if you look at Gary, like he doesn't care about quality. He just puts out so much, right? And I think it's less for me about what Gary says, more I just study him. I just watch what he does and replicate it through my own funnel, let's say, like through my own self-awareness of how I want to communicate and who I want to become. But he's really created the blueprint of the future, right? Like becoming a human media company that puts out like 100 pieces a day across everything. He's really built out a team of 30 people that systemizes the whole process for him. And he's showing you, like, he's literally showing you exactly how to do it.
yeah. It's absolutely phenomenal what that guy is doing. I don't know if I heard about this a while ago, but did you go to like New York City and have a meeting with Gary Vee or something, or was that, I might be confusing you with somebody else?
No. So I didn't have a meeting with Gary Vee. So my friend Jacob Kelly, do you know Jacob?
No.
Okay. So me and him worked side by side at OSEG, and he's a couple years younger than me too. So we were both like the young interns, like learning the ropes and stuff. And at the time, he actually put me on to Gary. I never knew Gary Vee before him. Jacob was into Gary and showed me him. And Jacob always had an itch to start a podcast. And I told him, I was always like asking him up, like, do it. But I was like, okay, like, how can I like take all the excuses out? And I was like, I'll be your first guest. I was like, there's that excuse gone. Like, I'm going to be your first guest. So I'm going to force you to do it now, because now I'm in it. And so I was his first guest on this podcast, and he made a promise to himself that when he films 15 episodes, his whole podcast is about how influencers grow their following. Basically wants to share those insights with people, right? So he interviews like influential people. And so his goal was, when he gets to 15 podcasts, he's going to go to New York and he's going to interview influential people in New York. And that was like his like North Star in the beginning, to get him to 15 podcasts from nothing, right? And so I told him, when you go to New York, I'll come with you, and I'll, you know, help you like carry everything. I'll set up everything, and I'll just come for the ride, you know? And so he hit his 15 podcasts, and literally like 2 months leading up to like when we were going to go, we were just like every night just DM like unlimited people. We just go to like the New York location filter and like the VaynerMedia location filter, and just find influencers and just DM them and be like, basically, this is how you get an influencer, is you make it hard for them to say no. You say, hey, we're coming to New York this time frame. If you can carve out an hour, we'll come to you, we'll set up everything, and then we'll just send you tons of content for free. You know, they have all the leverage because they're the influencer, but we're basically, all they need to do is carve out an hour. They don't have to move. We'll come to them, carve out an hour, and then you'll get a ton of free content that you can leverage however you want. So that was the value prop. We probably sent like 1,000 DMs between us both. And I think we shot like 10 podcasts, and 2 of them were with VaynerMedia employees. So one of them was with Caleb Ralston, who's one of his videographers. And the other one was with Brandon Hatcher, who works in Vayner Talent, I think. Vayner Talent, yeah. So basically, when we went to go meet Caleb, he had got Knicks tickets at the last minute. So he only had like 30 minutes. So we were in and out really quick. And it was like cool to go into Vayner, but that was that. And we were like, okay, whatever. And then when Brandon said yes, we went like two days later back to Vayner, and the first thing he did was give us like a walk around the office, and we saw Gary's office, but there was people in it at the time. So and it wasn't Gary. Like Gary, I guess like probably wasn't there that day. I don't even know. But so he like gave us, and he's like, that's his office. And it was like, cool. Then anyway, we interview him. Well, Jacob interviews him for like 2 hours, and we're just in a boardroom interviewing him for 2 hours, gave us unlimited time. And then afterward, the thing about me is I'm like a fly on the wall just listening, right? And the whole time I'm like thinking of like what I would say if I was Jacob, like following up to his questions. So after the mic cuts off, it's like my turn to interview him. So I'm like asking all these questions. We're going back and forth, and we probably spent another hour talking. And we started the interview at like 6. So it was like 9 o'clock at night now. And so we come out of the boardroom, and the office is empty. And he's like, want to see if we can get into Gary's office? And we're like, yeah. So he goes up to the door and literally puts his hand on the door, looks at us and goes, do you think it's locked? And we're like, fuck. And he cranks it, the door opens. And so we went in, and it was just like, it was honestly like just surreal. Like I don't even like really remember it, to be fair. And yeah, we just like looked around for a couple minutes, took some photos, and then bounced out. But yeah, that's how that happened.
Man,
it was crazy, bro. Like it was literally off of an idea that we like conjured up while we were just like interns, and it led to us like sitting in Gary Vee's office. Nuts.
That's dude. That's a story that's going to be with you for life. Like that's one of those things that it's just like that's why I highly recommend to people is like do crazy stuff like this. It's like have these goals, and like the thing with this is it probably like, to be honest, like the total cost of the trip wasn't even probably that much in the grand scheme of things. And then, meeting all these people and having that experience of being like, seeing like when you're watching Gary Vee's or watching anybody's content, and then you get to go to where they're filming the content or like their iconic, let's say like podcast room or YouTube room, and you see, and you're like, holy shit, you're like, I've been watching this for like 2 years, and this is like, this is his backroom setup. Like these are all his stuff. Like this is, he's interviewed like, let's say like Tom, what's his name? Tony Robinson, Tony Robinson or somebody else in the room. And you're just like, holy shit.
Crazy, right? And the key is too, is like the whole trip was built off Instagram DM. Mm-hmm. DMing random strangers. And like Gary was cool, but like we met so many cool people and went to so many cool places, and like still keep in touch with them. And it's just like, we just sent some DMs out and literally like made life-changing experiences and networking experiences that, could potentially change our life down the road.
Yeah. And that's one thing that's come from this podcast is like at the beginning, I was so nervous to reach out to people. Like it's I don't know. You're just nervous. You're like, oh, what if they say no? What if they're like, blah, blah, blah. It's like all this like stuff that isn't real that's built up in your head that you're thinking like, oh, they're going to say this. They're going to, I don't know. You just have this like irrational fear around it. And now it's like, once you start doing it, it's like you put those reps in, it becomes so much easier. And like, for me right now, I feel comfortable messaging anybody. And then, if they don't respond to it, or if they say, oh no, I'm busy, in my mind, I take it into like a bit of a game or like a competition and be like, no, I'm going to get this person on my show. It might not be, this year, but, in 3 years, I'm going to have this person on my show. They're going to come on my show and they're going to tell, their amazing story about what they do and how they did it and give advice to,
Dude,
other people.
All you've had is a perspective shift, mm-hmm. right? Like, you used to see the challenge of them saying no as like a killer, as a fear. Now you've just switched your perspective as like, oh, that instead of it being a fear, it's going to fuel me, right? It's the classic concept of like, you have an alcoholic father, and that either means you become an alcoholic or that means you never touch alcohol. It's all about the perspective, right? The situation doesn't change, but your perspective changes everything, right?
Yeah, 100%. That's like that's like that little switch, and it's so weird because it's like these little switches that you do in your brain, and then next thing you know, you're just off and you're going and you're freaking, you're going after your dreams, and you're just like continuing to pursue your dreams or whatever you want to do, whether that be in music and business and arts, acting or whatever, right? Which is crazy. So I actually want to ask you something about that. Is like, did you sort of have that? Like, can you remember back to like having a perspective change and being like, holy shit, like I'm actually able to do this. I'm able to run my own company. I'm able to be like, really good at digital marketing. Like, do you have like a, like a period, like at all, where you just sort of like,
It's honestly, it's crazy. I think it's actually the reverse. It's lack of overthinking. It's more just like blindly going, if that makes sense. I think overthinking is what creates these obstacles in your mind versus just like not thinking and just executing. Um, I think to some extent, like I'm very fortunate of how I was raised by parents that just always told me I can do whatever I want and I can be whatever I want and whatever I chose. Like when I was in like grade 3 to 6, like I did dance because I was super into like hip hop crews and all the dance stuff. And they were like, do dance. And then when I got serious with soccer, they're like, do soccer. And then when I skateboarded and when I rapped, they were like, do it, do it. So in my mind, I've always been reinforced with just like whatever I want to do, I can just go do it. Right. So I don't have those blocks. No one was ever like, no, you can't, you'll never do it. Like I think like to some extent, like that environment that I was raised in allowed me to just have that. But I do think it's something that can be developed as well as you get older and just start to understand that those outside opinions don't actually mean anything, right? You should only, in my opinion, you should only consider taking advice from someone that has done what you want to do. And then even within that, you have to understand that you're a different person than they are. So if I want to build a marketing agency, I can listen to Gary and I can say, okay, he has permission to talk and I should listen. But at the same time, I got to go, but I'm not Gary DNA wise. So take those nuggets, put them through my own self-awareness bottleneck, and then do with them as I will, right? I really think that anyone can accomplish anything. You just have to figure out how you accomplish it. So a lot of the times studying how someone else has done it might not be the actual way you need to do it.
yeah, 100%. Yeah. That's like, like some people, like I was talking like this is a conversation like probably a couple of weeks ago or something. And pretty much we were talking about influencers and, how they became so famous so quickly. And it's like, well, you got to think about it. And then it's like, if you're starting it and it's like, you might feel jealous or, you're a little bit upset because you're like, why isn't this happening as fast as, I'm putting out the videos and stuff. But really, like if you're comparing yourself to a digital creator in LA, that's a completely different shift. If you're in like, Northern Canada or somewhere, or in Europe, and you're not in a big, like if you're in LA, you have so much more content potential to create stuff and you have a much higher potential to collab with different people, right? Which is hard to do. So comparing yourself to saying like, oh yeah, somebody who was, who moved to LA when they were 20 and they grew this, huge following and stuff off collaborations and other things and just creating content there. And you're comparing that to what you can do. It's like, it's going to take more time, right? Like it's not just gonna, it's not just gonna happen. You're comparing yourself to somebody else, which you should never do.
Comparing yourself to anyone is a bad idea, regardless of how similar they are to you or not. It's just a bad use of time. Like there's nothing good that's going to come out of it, period. You should never do that. And the underlying reason of that is because you don't know anything about them. You just see what you see, which is 1%. You don't understand the 99%. You don't know if their dad was super connected in the space and just walked them in the door. But also you don't know if they spent 1,000 hours in 1 year just hammering at it in the shadows. Like you just don't know the details. So comparing yourself without any viable data is just a bad idea.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And one quote I really like is that like if you're focusing on a goal, or let's say like winners or something, they focus on they stick in their lane and they focus on what they need to do to be successful. They don't focus on what other people are doing, or comparing themselves or anything like that. They just stick at, I'm going at my speed and I'm putting everything I have towards my one goal. And that's what I'm focusing on. I'm not focusing on what Jeff's doing to the right, or, let's say Jennifer's doing to the left or something. It's just, I'm focusing on what I'm going to do. And when I get there is when I get there.
Yes.
Yeah.
No comment. You said it. You're 100% correct.
Awesome. So I actually want to talk a bit about, like, did you have any, like, I know that you were going in and you were just sort of like, you said that you sort of had this like blind sort of, you just sort of walked through and you just started doing it. You just started like, did you ever have like a rational fear that you had to get over? Like, when you were starting this business, like, were you afraid of something that's like,
No.
just, or like, I know that you
I put it like I put in the work, you know, like I feel like the reason I would have been fearful is because deep down I know that like I'm taking a shortcut and just trying to start a company for whatever reason without having the skills necessarily at this moment to execute it. But it's like I'd worked with sports teams and spent real money. Then I'd worked with smaller businesses, restaurants, and made real impact. And then I worked on a massive project and really changed the course of it. And through all those things, I've developed systems that work. So it's not like I just bought a course and like I'm just doing this, hoping it'll work. It's like I've actually done it, right? It's like a person, if you want to be a personal trainer and you've trained for 10 years, like I wouldn't be scared to go train someone versus you want to be a personal trainer and you just came out of CanFit and you've never actually trained yourself. You know what I mean? That's really scary because you don't really know what you're doing. So for me, like I just didn't have that fear because I really believed I could do it because I did it already, right? It's not like it was just delusion. Like I had already done it. I already knew what to do. So I think,
yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. So yeah. So with that, like, because you already did it and there's some skills that you can only get by actually doing it. And that's the thing, right? Like, let's say somebody who's like, you know, they want to, you know, they want to do something. Let's say for anything, for example, let's say rap or anything like that, or, you know, music or something like that, or reach, you know, having interviews or stuff like that. And there's an irrational fear because they don't know what they're doing. They literally have no clue what they're doing, but that's stopping them from starting. And if they don't start, then they're never going to get that experience to actually be able to execute properly on what they're doing. So like, do you have any advice or anything towards that point at all?
Yeah. The thing is like, when you put it that way, it becomes logical to not have expectations early. When you're like, yeah, if I want to create something that's meaningful and that actually works and that's creating an impact and that lasts for a long time, I should have to do trial and error for a long time to learn and get those skills to then actually be able to build that. And when you logically think of that, it doesn't become so scary to fail for 2 years. It's like, no, that failure is lessons. It's the process of getting to the point where you can do that. But people just don't logically think. They're like, oh, if I start tomorrow, like that guy over there has a good company, like I should be able to have a good company. So if I start tomorrow, it should just start happening. And it's like, that mindset is what stops you, right? I told someone the other day, and I don't even know if this is completely aligned with what we're talking about, but they sent me their list of the things they want to accomplish in the next month. And I was like, the only thing that's going to stop you from accomplishing that list is saying you have to do it in the next month. Because it's a mental block that is not rooted in any form of logic. Like what makes it need to be done in that month, right? And as you get closer to the end of the month, it starts to stress you out because you're like, oh, like, am I gonna, you know what I mean? Instead of just saying like, I'm gonna do this list at my pace and I'm gonna make sure it gets done. That to me is the formula for success, right? And I think it just becomes thinking about it logically, right? Of like, no, it makes sense that it might take longer, it might take shorter, but who cares? I just need to get the list done and get better. And
Yeah.
I'm the same way. Like, I don't try to grow my company as fast as I could. I say no to over 50% of my offers, not because I don't think I could do it or it wouldn't work, but because I don't feel ready. I want to build in a certain way. I just don't want to just build aimlessly, if that makes sense. And so I think logically understanding like the steps and not trying to rush. Like, I don't know. I think people are just in a rush.
Yeah.
And it's usually rooted in insecurity because they want to show off to other people that they're successful.
Yeah. 100%. It's like focus on the execution and not the time restraints that you're putting yourself under. So it's just like, yeah.
Or just start to build time restraints as you get data and start to understand what it actually looks like. But people just put arbitrary timing on things. Like I always say, if you want to accomplish anything, it's hard work and patience, right? You have to put in those 15-hour days in theory, like maybe 12, maybe 10, whatever it is for you, but you have to put in that work and then you have to do it over a long period of time, right? And if one of the two is missing, you can still get there. It'll just either take longer or take more work, right? Like to me, it's like if you need to put in 10,000 hours, you'll do that quicker if you're doing 15-hour days, or you'll just do it longer if you're doing 10-hour days. And neither's right or wrong. It's just be practical based on what you're actually doing, and then have that roadmap of practicality to when it makes sense, right? So if it's like that means it'll take me 7 years, expect it to take 7 years. And if it takes 3, great. And if you start to realize at the 7-year mark, like the world's changing and it might take 10, then readjust. But it's just like, I just think people don't think logically, right? And that just creates false expectations, which holds them back from their full potential.
Yeah. I agree with that, man. Yeah. It's like you're saying, it's like you need to put that hard work in, and you need to be patient with it. And that's like, those are key things. Well, the patient one is what a lot of people, I know at my age, I'm 20 years old, and it's like, patience is so hard, because it's like, you just want to, you're hungry, because like you want to go be successful. You want to be at the top of the world. You want to do all this stuff, but it takes time, right? It takes time to do it. And it takes time to actually get to that point.
And the issue with that mindset is that you're looking for fulfillment in the finish line.
Yeah.
If you do something where you're fulfilled doing it, that's the thing about me, is like, I don't care about where it ends. I don't actually care at all. It could end at this amount of money, or this amount of money, this amount of scale, that amount of scale. Like, I don't care. I literally love every day. And when you fall in love with that, that's where you then build something meaningful, because it's not a chore. You're not like doing all this because you want that. You're doing all this because you want to do all this. But by virtue of that, you do it forever and then get that.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And that's that's what Gary Vee says a lot. With that is like, falling in love with your process and really enjoying what you're doing. And when
I always heard him say it, but as of late, I've actually believed it.
Mhm.
It hit me the other day. I was like, I just realized, I was on a long drive, and I realized my superpower is I don't care, on so many different levels, on so many different places. That's why I live in a blissful mindset, is because I don't overthink, because I just don't really care. And the reason that I don't get stressed out about business is because I don't really care. Like, if the government was like, yo, no more digital marketing agencies, I would be like, perfect. Now I would just find something else that I enjoy the process of, and start to build up that, right? And I don't really, the reason I'm okay with rejection, all this stuff, is because like, I'm good with myself. I don't really care what the outside world thinks, or if a client wants to fire me. Like, as crazy as it sounds, I don't really care. And the only thing I care really about is like the process. I really enjoy that. That's where I find my happiness. And then inherently within the process, you have to care about your clients. So it's built into the process, and that's the level that I care about them. But in a macro, like, if my business failed, I'd be like, perfect. And I'd just go do something else. Like, and I think like that's what it comes down to, is just like having that level of just putting things into perspective, and building that way.
So how did you actually get to that? That's a really interesting point to be at. And how did you actually get to that? Like, were you always like that? Or how did you get to that point of being like, okay with, being like everybody says like, oh, be okay with failure, but being really okay with like just loving your process, and being like, it's not about the money. It's not about the fame, or not anything about that. It's just, I get to do what I love to do every single day. Like, how did that, like, when did that sort of like
Yeah.
hit you, and how did that actually sort of happen?
Yeah. So I think it's always been there, but it's just been realizations over time to actually like explore it, and define it in my mind. But I think it comes down to just like the higher level purpose of my life, I think, is to help others. Like, I just genuinely, selfishly get more satisfaction out of helping other people than I think they get from me helping them. Like, it's actually like reverse. Like, people will be like, wow, you're very nice, you're always helping. And I'm like, me helping you is helping me more than that's helping you, as crazy as that sounds. And because that's my process, that manifests in a lot of ways, right? Like, in my business, the reason I love operating it is because I genuinely feel like I'm helping my clients. It's not like I'm like hiding things from them and like scamming them and hoping that they don't realize. Like, and I see it in the data that I'm actually making differences, right? And then in my personal brand side, like, that's why I like to interact with people and talk about everything, not just business, not just marketing, but like mindset, relationships, personal, like everything, because I like to help people. That makes me happy. And then on the very personal side, like close friends and family, like I spend a lot of time talking to those people and helping them work through their problems, and helping them expand into things, because like it makes me happy, right? So I think for me, having that high level purpose etched out, and it being something that I've discovered over time, I've always had it, but I didn't discover it until of late, allows me to just put things into perspective. It's like, oh, if a client fires me, that's okay. I can help other clients. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not really tied to like the financial of like, oh, I just lost some. Like, I don't care. Like, it just always kind of comes back to that. Like, I'm just going to keep rolling. I'm going to keep trying. And then the other thing to that is I think it comes down to like base level gratitude, right? What I really try to do is always find things to be grateful for at all times, right? Like, I'm grateful that you reached out to me to do a podcast. Like, I'm super grateful for that. That means a lot to me. I'm grateful that, I live in a safe country. I'm grateful that my mom's healthy. I'm grateful that the air is clean. Like, things that like aren't going to change that quick, right? Like, the country's going to be safe for a while. The air's going to be clean for a while. I'm going to have a roof for a while. You know what I mean? And so it's things that like, if you root your gratitude in those, then little things like a client firing you or spilling your coffee or someone calling you a loser doesn't matter, because you just default and be like, man, I'm just happy I'm safe and I'm warm, and you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it just brings you back to happiness.
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing, is just like 100%. And it's hard to get there, because there's so much, things that are like coming at you all the time, and you're like, you're wanting to, you're trying to like figure out who you are, like at a younger age, but also at like, I've met people that are like 35 years old and they're still figuring out who they are and what they love to do.
And
And
that's beautiful.
there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, or making a jump into a new career path. I had an amazing lady on here she's jumped from a different, like, she's head of marketing for a few, like, well, she's a head of marketing for a new company now. But she, just finding her, going through her journey and going through all that. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with that. That's amazing, because you're figuring like,
Yeah.
it's better to, I always think it's better to go through that and be happy than be at the same job or be doing the same thing and hate what you're doing day in, day out, and be miserable and be upset. Right.
100, like obviously, you know what I mean? Like, it's just crazy, man. And like, to me, the people that inspire me are the people that are doing the harder things like that. Like, for me, when I transitioned, I was 22, and it made sense logically to me, which is like, to me, it's not like that inspiring, but it's like a 35-year-old person making a complete life change because they want to follow their heart. Like, it's inspiring. And then if a 6-year-old's doing like, as life gets longer, it gets harder in theory. And so it's just like, that's even more inspiring to me. And I think like it's once again a perspective shift. Some people would see that as oh, you're a loser, you're lost. But I see that as, you're inspiring me. You're gonna inspire others. You're gonna be happier. Like, it's all perspective. It's one of those things that like, what people always think is like, in the beginning, like, they're gonna post and no one's gonna care and people are gonna make fun of them and and like, sure, that may happen. But as you continue and relentless, and people are seeing it, what you actually start to do is inspire them, because deep down they want to do that too. The reason they're talking shit is because they want to pull you to where they're at. So if you start to do your own thing and start accomplishing, they want to call you a loser because it makes them feel like you're coming back down to their level, right? Oh, you're a loser, you're failing, right? And that makes them feel good because they're not failing, because they're not trying to do those things, right? But then all of a sudden, as you start to actually have some success, being a loser switches to being an inspiration, right? I bet you, if you map like anyone that's built their own thing, it started off with people like judging them and thinking they're crazy and an idiot. And now it's completely flipped to, wow, you're inspiring me, right?
Yeah. That's the crazy bit about it. It's like when you first you go off the trail and you go start your own thing. It's, people are like, a lot of people don't like naturally like it when you go away from the herd or go away from, or change or anything like that. Right. It's like, oh, what's this guy doing, thinking that he's, better, or this girl thinking that they're better than all of us or something like that. But then once they, if you keep doing it and keep building, you're going to hit a point where people are just going to be like, wow, like, look at this person, look what they're doing and stuff. And it's like, it's amazing. I sort of want to jump now to, you have a lot of like expertise in the digital marketing field. What are your sort of thoughts with TikTok and other platforms such as that self with like growing personal brand? Like, how would you go about growing a personal brand in, today's world?
Yeah, it kind of depends what type of personal brand you want to build, right? I think obviously it's always good to go to where the attention's at, but you also have to have a format that works for what you're trying to accomplish. So I think it's tough for me to give hardcore advice without having a specific contextual situation. But I mean, for me, like the growth platforms obviously right now are like TikTok, Instagram Reels, LinkedIn low key is a growth platform. YouTube will always be a growth platform if you're good enough, right? Like that's a place where like if you put out good content, you'll find your way. Instagram outside of Reels is not a growth platform in my opinion. Like nobody goes viral on Instagram outside of Reels now. But before Reels, like think about it. Like you ever heard something going viral on Instagram? It doesn't happen, right? Whereas like Facebook at least has like the share button, the shot. YouTube has like a really good algorithm that if it can tell when a piece of content's good and just starts to shoot you up. And then TikTok was built for virality because there just is so many people on it and not enough content. So your content starts getting shown to a lot of people, right? And so what I would say is like test out the growth platforms like Reels and TikTok and LinkedIn and try to structure your content to make sense in those platforms. But at the end of the day, if you're good enough, you're going to win no matter where you go. You just have to be in the right context, saying the right things in front of the right people. And it's tough to give contextual, like it's tough to give advice without context because like literally I could give a million different structures based on a million different people and what they want to do.
Let's say I'm going to use a bit of this time right now. Is like, well, let's say a business podcast. How would you go about growing a, like from your point of view, growing a business podcast such as this one?
Yeah, so I would just reverse engineer each one of my guests, right? Because a business podcast, like depending on the type of guest you have, it could fit in different places, right? So if you have a guest that's giving like really good, valuable tips about how to grow a company, like obviously that would be like a LinkedIn play, right? And I would take those valuable clips. But if that same person is then talking about their story and how as a child, you know, this happened and that happened, and it's very emotionally appealing, that might be a great piece for Facebook where like families and people share like that, right? And then on say something like TikTok, you might want to take like a funny moment from the podcast and clip that and post it. So it's like, it's about respecting the houses that you're in on social media, right? Like what works on what works on Facebook, what works on LinkedIn, and then taking the singular interview and finding the things that align and pulling them and placing them.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. And what do you like, with these platforms that are like, I know you said previously in the podcast that it doesn't really matter about being the first to, first to the social media, as long as you're good, you focus on being great at whatever sort of field you're in.
Being first can definitely be an advantage, but if you're good, you'll always be able to get there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. True. So, with that, is there any like, because there's a platform called I think it's Trillier or something, or
Yeah, true.
yeah. So I was wondering what were your thoughts on that one, because it's similar to TikTok.
Yeah.
And there's
Honestly, I know zero about Triller.
oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I wish I could answer that, but it's just in terms of like what the scope that I work on for clients, like it's just never been a place that makes sense to play. We would consider TikTok, but even TikTok is a little bit out of the realm for my clients. The services I offer are paid ads, right? So TikTok's paid ad product, as far as I know, isn't even available to everyone. It's select advertisers that have it. So I can't even run ads on TikTok. So that's why I don't even look at it, right? So yeah, I wish I could give you an answer, but I just don't know.
Okay, yeah, that's fair enough. And so do you do any like influencer marketing at all with your company?
I don't know, not through the company. I'll definitely, if I'm consulting for someone, I'll recommend it when it makes sense, but I don't take on that. I'll just recommend it and be like, I can connect you to someone who can do it, but it's just not a service I offer.
Okay,
But
awesome.
influencers are fantastic.
Yeah, and do you know quite a bit about that? And do you want to talk on that point of influencer marketing, or yeah?
Yeah. I I think as a brand, you have to find the influencer that actually just embodies your brand. You can't just pick any influencer with a following that is in the demo, let's say, even if it's in the demo, but that doesn't align with them as a person because it just doesn't feel right. But I think influencer marketing is an extremely effective method of selling because you're getting a testimonial from someone with influence, right? Someone that people trust and that people look up to, right? So for certain products like makeup and things of that nature, where it's a very aspirational product, people aspire to be like the person that's wearing that product. Influencers is a very smart route to go and can be very cost effective, right? Because the thing about ads is it's a demand and supply marketplace. You can't like call Mark Zuckerberg and be like, yo, I'll cut you a deal on these ads, right? You can't. It just happens. Whereas an influencer, you can always figure out something, right? Like a way to provide more value and get the cost down, or however you want to do it. And even for my startup friends, a lot of the times I tell them, I'm like, really consider if you can find that influencer that makes sense for your brand, giving them a very small piece of the company to be your influencer for a long period of time. Because I think as well, audiences are more inclined to buy when they see it over and over and over and over from the same person, because that feels more real. That feels more genuine of like, oh, it wasn't just a paid promo. Like this person, like it's in every third video, they keep talking about it and they're wearing it and they're actually, they love it. So all of a sudden it's like, wow, I actually want this. They love it. I'm going to love it. Right.
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
interesting strategy.
That's actually a great point. And that's what Gymshark does with their, their Gymshark athletes, their sponsored athletes, right?
Right.
Like I don't know if they like, probably at the beginning it's a better bet to, find one influencer and give them a small percentage that also works within your business as sort of like a partner as well.
Yep.
And at the beginning, but once you scale to a level where you're able you have disposable income that you can actually, you're able to sponsor then, specific athletes or specific influencers to actually carry your brand for a long period of time.
It's just like sports endorsements. Like that's what influencer marketing is. It's the same concept.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
just now you don't have to be a professional athlete to have a lot of people like you, right? Like it used to be sports, it used to be movie stars and like music artists, right? That would be the people that were like in the car commercials and on the cereal boxes. But now everyone can be famous, right? For just like on their own, which is exciting. And that's why the influencer marketing has become a thing.
Yeah, yeah. So is there anything that you sort of see for like the future at all that sort of like sparked your interest or you're learning about, maybe for like voice and AI or anything like that? I don't know if that really relates to your field at all, but anything that's like, you're thinking about like, hey, this is actually going to change the digital marketing agency in the, in the future or something. This is going to be an interesting play in the future.
Yeah, I'll go to voice in a second, because my thoughts are basically aligned with what Gary says. But something that I haven't heard Gary say that I think a lot about is like marketing based on moods, right? Like not just marketing to somebody that's like interested in cars and is a female and lives in this location, but maybe marketing to her when she's in an energetic state, right? Based on how she's live interacting with a platform, or based on tech that she's wearing. That can be, right? If the Apple Watch can monitor your heart rate or something like that, right? And it all can, like, that's what I'm saying. Like,
that's
it can
crazy.
be very right. And it's something that Spotify does. And this is what made me think, holy shit, this is a whole nother level of targeting that's never been explored. Because Spotify, you can target people based on the standard demos, but based on what they're listening to, you can tell if they're listening to a happy playlist or a sad playlist or this type of podcast or that. You can tell generally what mood they're in. So you can pick what mood you want to market to them in and then align your ad with that mood, right? Exactly. So that's crazy. And that's something I think about a lot. And then I just think like voice devices are just going to change.
But
But
before we go into voice, I actually want to stay on that a little bit longer with mood. So how would you actually like that? That's crazy because I've actually never thought about that. And you said Spotify's starting to do it a bit, but that's actually crazy of how they're actually starting to do that. Is like how they're starting to market like that. Like, so what in your mind, like what are some like, thesis sort of like play options for content creation for that? Or like, how would you sort of like operate that for like moods and stuff and targeting moods?
it obviously comes down to the business, but it basically is like any level of information you have about the customer, you just want to reverse engineer it into the content, right? So if we had a restaurant and we want to market to people that are feeling down, because I think everyone goes to like people that are energetic and happy, and that space will become more expensive. Whereas think about people that are feeling down, and if the restaurant was like, hey, has it been a tough day? Come in for a happy hour. And it'll relate to that vibe versus like, did you just have a fantastic day at work? Well, celebrate at the restaurant tonight. It's the same restaurant. It's just the positioning is different based on the mood. And obviously that'll resonate more with the person live, right? Because if they've shown that they're interested in food, obviously, let's say if they're interested in high-end food, let's get a little more segmented. That could be something that they've shown like 9 months ago. And maybe they've like kind of, their interests have changed now, right? And so it might not be as relevant versus the mood would be a live thing because it would be constantly changing.
Yeah, yeah, that's crazy about like if you're thinking about like today and with the amount of information that companies have on people for like marketing and stuff and how to targeting marketing stuff, that's absolutely crazy. And is there a way to like say a startup to sort of tap into that sort of that information to understand like, hey, I want to market, let's say an energy drink company, they're marketing from like their age demographic is, 18 to 26 years old or something like that. And how would they sort of tap into that or something?
Currently?
Yeah. Currently, or like, let's say for other companies, like where would you go to sort of find that information? Like
That's what I mean. Like that's why it's something that is emerging. Like that's like Spotify, like I said, is the first time I've ever seen it. And that's what put the idea in my head. And then I start to think about, okay, like how can other platforms tell what mood you're in, right? And I think like I don't know if this is true, but I think about like Facebook's how are you feeling today? And you can put like Hayden is feeling sad or Hayden is feeling happy or Hayden is feeling confused and then write the status. So it gives Facebook that data of how I'm feeling in the moment. Another thing is like they removed the like button and changed it with like, heart, hug, laugh, angry, right? Now when you, instead of liking stuff on Facebook, which gives them deeper context into how you're actually feeling, right?
Holy crap.
So I think exactly. And so I think they're starting to pull this data, but the thing about that is like, it's Spotify's built a business that's structured to have that data happening at all times based on what you're listening to. It just, you're going to know. Whereas like Facebook has put in the tools, but you still have to actively go and use them. You don't have to use them. So it's going to be harder for Facebook to get that live data, but that's why I think wearable tech is going to change the game, right? Like when my watch is monitoring my heart and when, my headphones is listening to what I'm saying, or even like the going into voice, right? The tonalities in my voice. If voice devices can pick up, am I happy while I'm talking to it? Am I sad? Am I tired? Am I confused? Am I like running around in the house trying to do things while, you know what I mean? Like, I think it'll get to a level where it can just understand a lot of those things. And then, AI and predictive models will just speed it up. But it's one of those things I don't know how it's going to play out. I just know it will. And so that's why it's interesting to me. And I'm just thinking about how to play on them.
Yeah. That's absolutely, yeah. The last segment right here, we're talking about that was actually crazy. Like that's insane. I know
we'll clip that part.
Yeah, for sure. I know we're coming to the end here, but yeah, where can people actually find out more about you? For as a digital marketing agency, and if they want to, use your services.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram, Hayden Cashion, HaydenCashion, LinkedIn as well. The website's being built starting next week, so we'll have that up very soon. It's crazy. I'm a digital marketer. I don't even have a website, but I just play on personal brand. I just have a different model than most people. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the show, Hayden. It was amazing talking with you, man.
Hey, my pleasure, Max. Let's do this again soon.